The whole we're a family thing was a terrible thing we did throughout the 2000s. A company is not a family. Let's be honest, we're trying to accomplish this thing. There's clear, achievable goals. It's not we're all just here to hug each other and sing Kumbaya. We're trying to get this thing done. The reality is sometimes it's a blur and you look back and you're just like, how did I get here, right? Like all the 1,000 little baby steps accumulate. One strength I think I've always had is I like to hand off. The goal is to make yourself not essential to whatever role you have. How do you ever get promoted if they absolutely need you to do the thing that you do? I'm happy to get my hands dirty, but I know that I'm a generalist. I'm not the best at anything. I know a little bit about marketing and accounting and finance from doing an MBA, but I'm weak at all of them. An intermediate person or higher is going to be a better subject matter expert in almost anything than me. If I can get the ball rolling and get the right person and hand it off and then see that they're getting traction, then great. If you are clever enough to build another slot company in 2026, good on you. Because I don't know how you can be with 400 other studios and 40,000 games. That is a tough racket, right? As a red ocean. I like the uncontested space. It's a problem. People like it. They get it. Name another company that does what we do. You probably don't know of too many, right?
Welcome to the iGaming Leader Podcast. I am here with Kyle Wiltshire, founder and CEO of TESTA. We're going to talk about everything from him starting out his iGaming career in the Philippines, working with some brilliant people, as well as some very challenging minds. We'll talk about him bootstrapping his company, his leadership journey, some of the challenges and massive failures that he's gone through and the lessons that he's learned from that, as well as the big successes that he's had and what we can draw from that as well. It's turned out to be a very inspirational conversation. Kyle has the battle scars to show for his experience and is glad to share them with all of us. So with that being said, let's dive in. Hey, Carl, welcome to the podcast, man. Really excited to talk to you today. I wanted to start with your story about moving to the Philippines, if that's okay for you. I think it's a good place to start with. Tell me a little bit more about that. What kind of started that move?
It was pretty simple. They were expanding an Asia operation over there, and nobody really wanted to go. I was the only one that put their hand in the air. The team out there was quite small, and they were bought up a previous operation, and they're moving it over to the Manila. I was in charge of a team doing, I don't know what you call it these days, kind of like DevOps, frontline support, but also kind of server configuration and moving stuff around and making sure releases were clean and all those type of things. So I had just moved to Montreal. I was there all, a month or two, and was basically being tasked with setting up this team in Philippines that would help with 24-hour support for all the tech stuff. It was brutal because it was 12 hours difference. So I was, staying till 9 p.m. in the office and doing these, this is before Zoom. So we had these like teleconference things in the boardroom. And, I'm sitting there till 9 waiting for people to come into the office on the Philippines side at 9 because of the 12-hour difference, doing a few interviews a night, getting it all set up. I got out there and of course, nothing went to plan. We thought it was going to be a 1-month project. I hired 2 people. One didn't show up on the first day. And I trained another and it was looking really good. And he quit after a month. So like 3 months into this whole process, we reset. I came back to Montreal. I went back out there. 1-month project turned into 3. 3 months turned into eventually some of the leadership there said, why don't you just move here? And my hesitation was, I just relocated to Montreal, but it was also like 24, 25. And eventually I was like, hell, why not? Right. So packed up, moved out there. It was supposed to be a 1 or 2 year thing, and it kind of became indefinite. So worked there a few more years and eventually had a start in the Philippines, and that's how I wound up on that side of the globe.
Love it, man. When we spoke last time, you were talking about the craziness of that first job there at the Bodog job. You mentioned some great names and brilliant success of people that turned into becoming really successful, people that we all know. But you also said about the opposite side, right? There was also some absolute, I don't know, like the extremes on both sides, I suppose. People that, weren't great to work with. So tell me a little bit more about what happened and how did that divide happen and how did that kind of show up as you were working there?
So to go all the way back, I had not much context of the gambling industry. My excitement was that I had worked in tech and IT. The company I worked for before Bodog was personal motivational events company. They did seminars and trainings, kind of like Tony Robbins type of stuff. And they certainly wanted tech, but it was a cost center. Right? You were just kind of this natural evil. They had to pay for their email servers and their systems and maintaining their website. So it was never that strategic. when I jumped into an online gambling company, it was blowing my mind. It's like there's more transactions happening than in a bank. At the time, the Canadian entity was Antigua licensed. I moved to the Philippines because they had core license there. That took me there, and I was helping the local operations and dealing with kind of the global support. So it started as kind of this small team, but over time, I think when I first moved over there, there's 50 people, and there was, after the call center and everything, there's about 1,200 when I left. So the company moves very, very fast, right? If there's an opportunity, suddenly there's a new office here, and you go from 50 to 100 people. You get this fascinating mix of people. You get people like myself, saw an opportunity, jumped on it. And then you saw people that could do the same and maybe didn't have that kind of corporate rigor of moving up the ladder, right? So we had a management team there that was some of the most talented, smart people I know, and lots of them went on to do all sorts of fascinating things or run big companies or build and exited businesses themselves. And then some of them were just, I don't know what they did. It was crazy. They were in the same management meeting as us and they had nothing to report. And there was no real damage to their status, right? Like there was never any repercussions. So I think you can learn from a well-organized business, but you can learn from a crazy business as well. And the Asia team was constantly changing. I think there was a bit more structure on some of the European and more global operations, but the Asia team, we went through 4 or 5 different managing directors in the course of 2 or 3 years. At one point, everybody from London moved to Asia to become headquarters. So suddenly we have politics of 2 of everything. You thought you were the CTO, now there's the other CTO. So it got a little crazy there. So to sum it all up, when the door's wide open like that, kind of get the best and the worst. There was not a lot of middle ground. It was a crazy place to be.
I think that's quite typical for fast growth organizations. It's almost like sink or swim, right? You've just got to deal with it like it's a fire hose. You've got to deal with the water coming in. Some people do and some people don't. Do you think it was inevitable that you'd attract people like that, or that people like that don't grow with the organization when it grows that quickly? Or looking back, maybe that could have been handled differently, perhaps could have been more successful somehow? How would you assess that now?
I think when you're constantly changing the macro goals, it's really hard to have consistent, if the objectives in January are not similar objectives you have by the end of the year, how can you ever measure where things are? So things move around really quick, and what was once the big priority changes quickly. We did get some great things off the ground and work with some great people. And I believe in the years, this was a very long time ago. I mean, that organization 2013. So going on 13 years ago. So I don't know how much of this is relevant now, and I haven't been in contact with people there in quite some time. Just in those days, it was so manic. There were opportunities. You could get a lot done and learn a lot of things because it was kind of go, 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 go. At the same time, what was important was constantly shifting, and who was responsible for what was constantly shifting. That gives ambitious people an opportunity to move really quick, but it also means that you can get the wrong people stuck in the wrong places.
Yeah, makes sense. Thanks for sharing that. Hey, and then in your intake, you mentioned something that I found super interesting. You said something about how your partners didn't handle things ethically in your previous startup. Let's talk about that a little bit. What actually happened? How did you discover it? And especially, how did that maybe affect how you structured TESTA now later on?
So TESTA comes from another company I run, which does very kind of boutique technical work, especially in Asia. Any sort of problems with performance or optimizing for devices or availability, that's what we really focus on. So TESTA is kind of the brand and the commercialization of something we've done in one shape or form for 8-9 years. We would always have people in various markets that could actually look at a product, that could look at a gambling site, or, not just that. We've worked with manufacturing, cybersecurity, and lots of different groups. They could get on the ground and show us, how does this look like on a real phone, through a real internet connection, etc. This originally started, we had a framework where we had some partners who had built up a platform. We'd kind of brought them in to help us recruit testers and do all these things. They put this platform together and they really, really drove it in the early years. And we were like, okay, fantastic. Let's get them involved. Let's maybe set up a separate company and make them partners. And, so we had this whole structure where basically this was this separate company that had these people involved because we wanted them to continue to drive it. And we eventually decided, okay, we're going to build these features and build this platform like this. And we had an engineer who really went his own direction, just did things that he wanted. We had a team in Taipei. He would not communicate or sync up with them. He would keep building stuff and show us here and there, but he wouldn't share his code. He's not really coordinating with the rest of the company in terms of what we need. He's not interfacing with our clients or the market at all. He's kind of gone off into his own little world, building this product, trying to copy another product that was already on the market without really talking to us much, right? So we kind of throw up our hands in the air and say, well, let's see what he comes up with. After 6 or 9 months or whatever, he gives this kind of full demo. And A, it's not really what we want. And B, once this is delivered, he wants, what did he want? He wanted more equity. He was basically holding this product hostage, right? We had been paying him the whole time with revenues from our clients. He hadn't been working with the team. And now we kind of had a gun to our head saying, if you want this product, you're going to have to give me this or give me that. And I don't mind a tough negotiation, but it was kind of like, pardon me, do you know how we got here in the first place? And unfortunately, I think our other partner in it just didn't really have commercial sense to see that this was basically a form of blackmail. So what we ended up doing is kind of just building around them, copying a lot of what we'd already built with other people. And we found we could do it leaner, meaner, better without them anyway. So once we started using other resources on it, we kind of said our goodbyes and said, if you think this platform is worth something, it's yours. You go commercialize it. You go market it. You go figure it out. Because that's actually the hard part. Building a tool that, looks neat is all fine and dandy. You go actually go take it to market. So it was one of those things where they tried to screw us and we took it pretty calmly and methodically. And it took 6-7 months, but eventually it was like, okay, goodbye, right? So I'm very careful about who I make a partner and who I bring in.
Man, that's awful. That's horrible. How did you stay calm? Like, do you remember the moment when you actually found, when he said something like, I want to have more equity? How did you feel in that moment? And how did you stay calm and methodical, as you said afterwards?
We already knew we were approaching the end of the road. I wasn't very excited about what was being built. At first, it was kind of like, you got to be kidding me. You're trying to extort me over something you built that I didn't even want, that I've paid for. But then the more you think about it, the more you think of that history, the more your blood boils. And I think my partner and I certainly had a few conversations where we were yelling and screaming and, kind of at each other and just venting. But in terms of how we dealt with it, I'm just very kind of calculated, careful. I mean, to be honest, I talk about it. It still bugs me. I mean, it's good 6-7 years ago, but boy, oh boy.
Yeah, because that's the problem, isn't it? You connect the dots afterwards, right? You look backwards and you think, these signs were there. You start blaming yourself. It's actually something that we spoke about last time. Remember when we were talking about like the hard thing about hard things, that book where he's talking about when you mentioned management debt and kind of this idea of sometimes you just don't make the hard choices because you think that's not bad or something. And then afterwards, it's obvious you should have, but then it's so hard to not blame yourself for that. And why did I do it?
You got to let things play out sometimes, I think. I mean, you never quite know, right? Like sometimes you have certain biases and you put certain things on people. So you may be looking at a situation through a negative lens and maybe you should let it play out so you know for sure. I like to know for sure. I'll say the nice thing about a situation like that is when you end a partnership with someone, sometimes it's what could I have done better or did they treat me right? In that case, it's so clean cut. Goodbye. I will never work with you again. It's so simple. They almost do you a favor there and there's no ambiguity. The tough part is half the time you kick the can down the road, it bites you, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it is fine, or you get more information and the situation isn't a big deal. You can't snap at everything, make every long-term decision right off the bat. You got to let some things play out. Hindsight's 2020. When they do eventually bite you, you go, God, why'd I waste so much time on that?
Yeah, that's the thing. And very often there's just no good decision, right? There's no clear decision. It's bad or worse. There's just options and you've got to choose. And you're the only one that can choose because you're at the top. What are you doing differently because of that experience now? Like, are you approaching decisions differently or are you less trusting of people? Like how's it affected you?
I'll tie this to something else in employee stock options, which I've done in the past. I really like that Silicon Valley model of getting everybody thinking long-term and this natural filter of people that want to take a little risk with you and therefore can actually reap the upside reward or think a bit more long-term. I was probably too freewheeling with partnership and equity in the past. I've learned through both employee stock option programs and stories like that, you got to be really careful who you partner with. And one thing I remember a partner of mine said during that whole thing was, if you're going to screw me over when there's no money on the table here, nothing's really been built. You're screwing me over nothing. So how would you act if there was something serious? Because the trust really shows up once there's, millions of dollars flowing, or people or equity or whatever. You have bank accounts that are full. That's a different story. So I'm just very careful about who I consider on, who else is on the balance sheet, who holds the equity, basically. Sharing revenue, sharing payments, you got to be very careful with who you partner with.
It is so true, isn't it? Even the best families break up over minor money issues when somebody dies, right? Yeah, so makes a lot of sense. You bootstrap TESTA, right? And explicitly, I think because of that, that's a deliberate constraint that you've put in place. One of the things it does, I suppose, is it limits how fast you can grow because there's a runway. But what growth opportunities did you have to say no to because you didn't have outside capital? And looking back now, was it worth it to bootstrap it, you feel?
Yeah, I'm glad we did, because I had a real estate startup in between stints in the gambling world or tech consulting world. We took venture capital and it became, you're immediately on a track. And once, it's almost easier to raise funding and run a business when you haven't, or you're pre-revenue or whatever. The second you start bringing financials into the situation, everybody's got those numbers to work off. So we ran that company quite aggressively and we found some product market fit. And the mistake is, when we started making some revenues, we thought we had cracked it. So let's throw a whole bunch of money at things, get super aggressive with the marketing budget. It was Philippines, so the salaries weren't super expensive, but we blew up to like 70 people at some point. And then we couldn't sustain it. Like, a lot of the revenues we found were churn out, or we thought we had a product people wanted, they didn't quite get it. And so things started to nosedive. And suddenly we had to lay off almost all the people we had, and we had to get rid of the fancy office. All the coffers went dry and we had to rethink how the whole company actually worked, right? So I've been a lot more careful to make sure that we understand the inner workings of what the pain points of customers. Do they like us? I think the first 2 TESTA clients, the team was very small. We signed them and I said, okay, we're going to see if they stick around for 6 months or a year before we make any other decision. We're running another business. We'll keep it kind of lean because I want to see if this is actually something, do they need us for a project this quarter, or are they going to use it consistently? Once we saw evidence that, okay, this is something that's useful and valuable and people will pay and continue to pay for, okay, now we can hire some expensive engineers and put aside a marketing budget and do all that. It's also just the natural extension of when you have other people's money, when you're spending money that would have been in your pocket otherwise, you're a lot more careful. You're a lot more scientific about things. So that's been a real lesson as well. So by the time we take a large venture check, if we do, we would have a formula, and it would just be, this is, the only thing holding us back now is just growth and commercializing. And it's just kind of a just add water scenario, right? Versus we're still in the woods exploring.
Yeah, makes sense. And I mean, now, again, looking backwards, would you have done exactly the same thing? Would you have bootstrapped it again, or would you have taken capital?
Maybe would have brought some partners in earlier, but again, I wanted evidence that things look quite healthy. What I've learned about myself is I'm naturally not the best fundraiser. It's not my favorite thing to do. I've also learned, when I was running that real estate startup with my partners, if we didn't raise funding in the next couple of weeks, we were toast. We wouldn't make payroll. So it naturally rises to the top of your priority list. When you're running one business off the free cash flow of another, you're not distracted by raising money. So it's strange because you don't need it. I thought that would give me lots of leverage. And in fact, it never became my biggest priority. So we would get offers or conversations would happen. I'd be able to say no, but then you realize that 6 months have gone by and you haven't put any money together. So it's a different way of doing it. It's leaner, but I feel like everybody has a deeper understanding of what we do, what works, what doesn't work. When you're running off other people's money, I think the CEO, CFO, or both are going to spend a huge amount of their time fundraising. Then how much time are they actually going to spend on the business? So I wouldn't do it any differently.
It sounds like it's made you far more considerate of how you actually want to position the product, how finding that product market fit, thinking about, okay, how do we optimize this? And then how do we scale, rather than thinking scale early and burning a bunch of cash just to figure out that it perhaps didn't work, right?
Yeah, and what we do is a little experimental and different as well. Right? If we're building a platform or another slots company or some sort of market proven thing, it's about competing and executing. It's kind of a different ballgame. Like we're building something that's a bit unique. The crowd testing industry is quite large, aiming at gaming and understanding what works with gaming and what doesn't, then looking at other verticals. It's all quite specific, right? So we can't run on too many assumptions. We're at the point now where I think we have learned most of the things we want to learn. So now it is more about commercializing it, growing it, just being more efficient at what we do and making it bigger.
Yeah, love it, Carl. Hey, you invest too, right? You're an angel investor. What do you look for when investing that you wish your previous partners had looked for in you? Is there any red flags that you walk away from a deal? Any specifics that are important for you?
At the angel stage, mostly the people, because they are going to learn lessons and things will change. There will be at least a few changes in how they commercialize it or how they do things. I do try to look for people that at least are open to feedback. I know what it's like to run a company and everyone's got an opinion. Sometimes you don't want to hear it, but if they're not interested in other perspectives or people from different walks or different sectors, that's kind of concerning. They should be open to it. But I mostly look for people and just try to assess, do they have the kind of grit to do this? Can they change it if they need to? Do they have the balls to do just really unpleasant things sometimes, like fire people or fire a customer? You have to have these confrontations sometimes. You can be polite. There's plenty of times you just have to do things that aren't pleasant. So are they that type of character? I probably look at the product and the model and the market more so than a lot of people. Because it's angel money, I don't care that much about some massive, crazy, giant return. I want to see 3X's, 4X's, 5X's. I've done okay at it. It's a lot of time. I'm doing less and less of it now. I've never invested in any iGaming stuff just because I'm so exposed to that sector anyway. I'm glad I got into it because it taught me a lot about being on the other side of the table and what it's like to be a smaller person on a cap table versus a big VC. You don't get to set any terms. It's kind of, these are the terms. They're not going to haggle with you over 10, 20, 30K. It's taught me a lot. We'll see how I do. It's been about a decade of doing it. I think I've kind of wound up coming out breaking even after all that. So it's a hard class to invest in for sure. Everything they say is true.
Really? Yeah.
Not everything pays, right?
No, that makes sense. But it sounds interesting as well from just being able to see things outside of iGaming, like you've just said about Testa as well earlier, which is, okay, yeah, there's a big market out there that does something similar. And from your consulting, you could have built anything, right? You could have built a studio, platform, whatever, but you chose crowdsourced, oh my God, that's a tongue twister, crowdsourced testing, which I suppose operationally quite difficult. Not, it's not the most obvious choice. It's not necessarily super flashy either, but why? Why did you do that? Was there a specific like frustration that you ran into that you thought, oh my God, the world needs this?
Saw it in almost everybody I work with, especially in my experiences, gray markets or offshore markets. You don't always have good feedback from the ground, but we also saw it with technical consulting we did. Sometimes we get buried in data of all these charts and all these points and all these things, but it's like, can somebody also tell me a story and just show me how the thing looks on the phone or on the computer? Can somebody give me, it's like that classic mom test, right? You've built this piece of software or app for months and it's perfect, and you hand it to a relative and somehow they manage to take the path where it like goes, totally ass backward. You will always learn something when you get a real person to get their hands on it. So that's an old problem we saw consistently, and we had done it so much with our technical clients. Where I started putting two to two together is I just saw that some gaming companies were hiring these larger crowd testing firms. They were quite expensive. People were saying, hey, don't you do this already? Like, could you do this more efficiently or do something like this and help us out here? So it was kind of one of those things where the market came knocking, and eventually I saw, oh, this is how you can commercialize it. This is how we could aim it at this category, right? The nice thing about, our industry is, as big as it is in terms of money and size and people, it's not that hard to like speak to, right? Like if you wanted to like build a company and say, something like insurance, which I think is actually a very similar industry to ours, it'd be very hard to get that brand out and get known. Whereas in gambling, it's kind of a small community of people that actually talk and make decisions, and it's not too hard to explain what you do and get it out there. So that's what it came from. It was a real problem that was driving us. I like uncontested space, right? If you are clever enough to build another slot company in 2026, good on you. Because I don't know how you can be with 400 other studios and 40,000 games. That is a tough racket, right? As a red ocean. So I like the uncontested space. It's a problem. People like it. They get it. And, name another company that does what we do. You probably don't know of too many, right?
Yeah, exactly. I love it. So many good references already, Carl. I love it, man. Like the mom test. I highly recommend reading the book if you're listening. It's great. And the like red ocean versus blue ocean strategy, really important as well. Just understanding where your market is and not fighting for the bottom of the barrel, like really, really good. I wanted to go back to that hard thing about hard things that we were talking about just a little bit earlier. And I mean, one of the things in there is about taking the easy way out and then paying 10 times harder later, right? That's the whole concept. And I think we all recognize it where we think we kind of avoid the short-term pain, but we feel it later, right? We don't want to have the uncomfortable conversation. Can you tell me about a time where you've done that, where maybe you've taken the easy way out on a management decision and later on you found out, oh my God, really shouldn't have done that. And how did that blow up for you? And what did it teach you?
If I go way back to one of the first teams I built, once I moved to Manila and I brought all these guys on, I eventually found a fantastic team lead who kind of took it over from me, and that let me kind of move a rung up the ladder and work on other things. But there was one guy there who was just generally not a very good performer. Nice guy, but made mistakes. And mistakes in that line of work are costly. They cause downtime, they cause bugs, they cause potential security issues. But he eventually, over time, did build up a fair amount of domain knowledge. But that kind of tendency to just mess things up and not really improve just continued, right? This was early in my career, and I come from a technical background. I think if I look in those early years, my biggest mistake was thinking that you could solve people like a technical challenge. I gave them the right support and the right training and the right this and the right that, it would all come around. So I put a lot of attention on trying to fix this kind of squeaky wheel. And what it ultimately doing was losing confidence with the rest of the team. Because the guys that were better and did their job, they knew they were getting paid roughly the same. They got very frustrated with this guy. They got frustrated that they would have to clean up his mess. They were getting compensated roughly the same. They got frustrated that I was giving this guy more coaching and attention than the guys that were performing well. So I really don't know how to say this nicely because it's a terrible thing to say, but I mean, you have to learn to fire people when it's not working, because it's actually this weird superpower that brings the whole other, it sets the example for everybody else. Because somebody comes into a group and they kind of look at the lowest performer and they go, well, that's the low bar. That's the minimum you must do in this team, right? Some people will come in and do the minimum or at least benchmark off the minimum. And if you accept that, then you're going to bring the whole group down. So if I look back, there was a couple of cases like that. It wasn't just that particular team. And sometimes they were good individual performers, but they had the wrong attitude or caused conflict. Or sometimes they were good when they worked, but they would strictly go home at 5 p.m. on the dot. And that would jam up other teams because they were waiting on something or whatever. And then we'd have another business to get to this thing. So now I jump on those things much faster. Leniency is fine, but if you see that somebody is not doing well, you got to give them the opportunity to improve and have those conversations. You got to jump on it really fast because it'll drag down everybody else, especially in a small team. They can hide better in organizations. When you're a team of 20, every time you hire one person, you've grown the team 5%. So that's a mistake I've made probably too many times.
It makes a lot of sense. That so many people do that because you've got to go through performance improvement plans and all that kind of stuff. As a manager, you're also almost forced to spend more time with poor performers than with high performers. And it definitely sets the wrong tone within your team, right? It sets the wrong intention. But I think the other side of that is what it does to you as a leader as well. When you're constantly just being involved with people that you need to fix because they're not living up to whatever the standard is that you want to have for that team, it drains you, right? It drags you down to that level as well. Just think about sports teams or something. I don't know for listeners how much sports experience, but you know that when you play with a better team, you actually play better immediately as well. And it's the exact same thing, right?
It's a strange 2 + 2 = 5 thing, right? Like things are really larger than the sum of their parts if you have all the right ones in there. So that becomes, I think, more and more of the focus as you mature, really careful about who you bring on, really careful about who you let continue to be in the team or where you place them or what their capabilities are. And I mean, the sports team analogy is so common because I just haven't found anything else that works quite that well. The whole we're a family thing was a terrible thing we did throughout the 2000s. A company is not a family. We have a mission. We're trying to all do this, right? Love working with these guys, going out with them when we have the opportunity. But let's be honest, we're trying to accomplish this thing. There's clear, achievable goals. It's not we're all just here to hug each other and sing kumbaya. We're trying to get this thing done. Sometimes you have to let go of people you really like. You could see that maybe they will be this or that, but you've given them the opportunity and the results just aren't there. So I think I made that mistake a good, I don't know, 8-9 years running before I tightened it up. And again, when it's running off your own money, you get a little more ruthless with those things.
Look, everybody will recognize that. Everybody will have gone through it. It's kind of this, hire slow, fire fast idea, which, it's difficult. You've got to protect the team and protect the business. So I think you're right. Hey, I want to talk a little bit about this parrot problem that we talked about. You said that you've hired people that are so good at parroting back to you on what you want to hear. Again, something I think most of us will recognize, right? Where people just repeat what you say and they understand the business better than anyone, but months go by and then, they haven't executed on a single thing, right? I feel that it can often be a bit like boiling a frog. The frog doesn't even notice. It just gets worse and worse until the moment it actually kind of dies. And I think sometimes it's like that in management as well. It's too late. How's that been for you? Have you got examples of that?
One of the kind of shifts I've need to make, because I mean, we're now all over the globe. We've got people across Europe and Latin America, and Central Europe. It is a little different now, but especially in the early TESTA days, it was entirely in Taipei. Taiwanese people, they work hard. They know their stuff. They come in sharp, but it's tough to get that pushback, that confrontation. My leadership team is quite good at it, but generally speaking, when the boss is in the office, nobody's going to push back too much or say this or that. Over years, we've encouraged it and it's gotten a lot better, but that was always the challenge. I would set things out, or when we talk strategically, you get nods and then people go off and work. Sometimes you want your ideas to be checked or filtered, or if you had more information, maybe you would think of it differently. So I was always looking for people that understand this more strategically. And then throughout the years, there was a couple times they're on projects or in full-time roles, we hired in people with the exact opposite, who could kind of speak at that 60,000 foot level, like, tell you exactly what you wanted to hear. They understand what you're going for, what plans were. But, the months go on, and everybody in Taiwan is getting done. And the big strategic talker has not delivered anything. Again, as you get older, all these cliches really ring true, and talk is truly cheap, right? Lots of people can talk. We now live in a culture where social media and podcasts or whatever, everybody has lots to say, right? The ability to speak and argue is valued so highly, but it's not actually that valuable in most organizations. Like, you need a kind of tight team making the decisions and plotting the course, and they want feedback and everything, of course, but you don't need 5,000 decision makers. You need a couple sharp people and mostly people executing. So there's that balance between, can I have somebody that gets stuff done but kind of filters back, and somebody that understands but can actually execute, right? So trying to find or build those is always the magic.
Yeah, I think it's one of the hardest pieces is, all right, we want people that still get their hands dirty as well, because they understand how things work, but can also talk on a very high level. And one of the things that you just touched on is kind of those cultural differences, right, between Taipei, Philippines, Canada, and many different nationalities within those places as well. One of the big things that I feel is true there, you tell me if I'm wrong, is kind of directness of people, right, in different cultures. Like, how willing or acceptable or normal is it to push back on things? How do you deal with that pushback or lack of pushback? Do you act differently with different people from different cultures? Are you just you and that's what you get? How do you handle that?
Like you said, you just know who you're talking to. with people that are less likely to challenge or push back, you want to encourage it and draw it out of them. And then for the people that have 1,000 ideas and whatever, you fight back, right? Like, okay, if we're going to do that, then I'm going to box, right? So it really depends on who you're talking to. I think I've actually seen moments where my team sees me do that and they're like, oh, geez. Because normally I'm pretty nice with the Taipei guys. No one's getting into big arguments there, but every once in a while in a different context, I'll have to fight back a little. Just knowing the strengths and weaknesses of who you're working with. And that's why the sports team analogy kind of works so well. Your job as a leader is really to assemble the best people. And they are smarter than you in many, many ways. And you're kind of steering it. You're making sure they all stay together and stay incentivized, and you point them in the right direction with things. But it does oddly get easier as you get stronger and stronger people. One of my favorite things to do is just whenever we're executing on something, I love it when I'm no longer involved. I love it when, just the dice, our booth is buzzing, all tables are filled. People are selling this thing that we only came up with a couple of years ago. They know it better than me. Sometimes I get lost in the product tiers, the specifics. They know it all. Same with technical projects. The reports are flying out. All the details are there. I'm not in the details anymore. That's always my goal, to not be in the critical path in any way, shape, or form.
I love that, man. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that handoff. So I ran into Jenny in IGB Exec Lounge in Barca, and she was buzzing from having the booth there. You said something that I found really interesting. You said you were like lazy on the last few trade shows, right? Where your team ran the booth, you handled sales, did presentations without you. The reason why I really love that is because for a founder, that's a huge handoff, right? It's your baby. Nobody's ever going to be as passionate about that thing as you are, or maybe they are, I don't know. But walk me through how you actually structured that handoff. How do you get over yourself, first of all, of letting go of that? And then secondly, how do you get people to do it right in a way that you're also comfortable with as a founder of that business?
The reality is sometimes it's a blur, and you look back and you're just like, how did I get here, right? Like all the 1,000 little baby steps accumulate. One strength I think I've always had is I like to hand off. The goal is to make yourself not essential to whatever role you have. How do you ever get promoted if they absolutely need you to do the thing that you do, right? And how do you go from the founder and CEO of a company to just the owner that kicks back? You're always going to need to be replacing yourself in some capacity. My strength is in certain things. I am happy to get my hands dirty. When we started doing technical projects years ago, I was researching, putting it together. I have a technical background. I mean, I'd be lost these days, but once upon a time, the first guy we hired put everything on a whiteboard, tiny meeting room, and started downloading it to him. So I'm happy to get my hands dirty, but I know that I'm a generalist, not the best at anything. I know a little bit about marketing and even a little bit about accounting and finance from doing an MBA, but I'm weak at all of them. Like there's going to be an intermediate person or higher is going to be a better subject matter expert in almost anything than me. If I can get the ball rolling and get the right person and hand it off and then see that they're getting traction, then great. If you want to talk about more books, kind of lean startup method of, you're going through these loops. You have this idea, you want to see if it's executed. If it's executed, this thing should change. You kind of have this hypothesis, you test it, and you just go through those loops over and over again. The things that work, you dump fuel on those fires, and things that don't work, you have to be quite aggressive to snuff them out. If you're not getting the results, you have to deal with it. You can't just be pot committed, right? Recently, we brought somebody on who said to me, I love working with founders because founders, they're not attached to anything personally. I think in the corporate world, there's a lot of politics. I put my name on this, so it can't fail. We got to go through it. But founders, they'll have this idea and it'll be them that was pitching it. And, I'll throw it in the trash can a couple of months later. That didn't work. New thing, right? So it's that lack of attachment to any idea. Happy to be wrong because you just know you're going through the loop, right? Throw it out, try it again. Eventually I'll be right and we'll double down on that. So I think you just do that a whole bunch of times and try people out. When things work, you invest in them. When things don't work, don't. I mean, it makes it sound simple, but that's fundamentally how you get there, I think.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, which is also going to be true for you, is that because you're a generalist and brutally honest about yourself, you're able to connect a lot of dots, right? You see connections that other people in your organization won't see because you know a little bit of everything rather than being super specialized in one area. I think that is a true, unique superpower, specifically for founders. And yeah, it's important because then you can start those fires and see what's gonna take off.
And you need to know your weak spots too and compensate for them. But think in any industry, you either want to be quite wide or quite deep. If you're in between, you're not going to be super helpful, right? I mean, you get to a point in your career where if you don't understand the basics about accounting, you are toast. Even if you're great at sales, operations, whatever, if you don't understand how this all eventually gets broken down into the one thing you can compare from any business to any business, the only standardized part of business, you're toast, right? So you need to have some understanding of every little part if you're going to run the whole org, I think.
Yeah, a mentor of mine called it T-shaped knowledge. So T-shaped bar, right? It's like the T is very, you've got wide knowledge on many different areas, and then you've got one bar going downwards, which is your deep knowledge about subject matter. I think that's quite interesting visualization, and that makes sense. So last thing I wanted to talk about here is kind of the tech to sales thing. As a founder, people often feel that a lot of it needs to be sales. You said you're not super salesy extrovert, right? Which is great, but you're CEO of a sales driven business, right? Tell me about the first time you tried to sell TESTA and it went badly. I'd love to hear that. How did that work out?
Boy, I mean, so much of it goes badly in the early days. I don't know if I have one particular story. I mean, first of all, you think anybody that'll talk to you as a potential lead, that they may not be actually qualified for, they don't have the problem or whatever, right? Second, you have kind of the easy comparisons for something like Testa. I can go on Fiverr and get a tester for $50. It's like, you absolutely can't. And if you're looking to only do one test, please do that. You are talking to the wrong guys, right? I think when you first start selling something, again, those loops, you haven't been through them. So even if you come nice and prepped and you know your product now, you will get caught flat-footed because you just haven't heard that one before. And unless you're an absolute genius, you can't come up with a good response on the fly. You got to think of it, right? And this is something that I like having everything organized and structured. I'm not someone that can smooth talk my way out of those type of situations. So there was plenty of those in the early days, but you just do it enough times and you talk to enough people, take enough shots, and eventually something comes through. So in the early days, we didn't quite know where we fit or what our profile was. We spoke to a lot of white label and affiliate groups and small people. And we spoke to them because they know the problems better than anybody else. They drive a bunch of traffic to an operator. It doesn't convert, or certain things in the reg process kill them. They don't get their share of the revenue. Everything dies. Affiliates also typically don't have the most giant unless they're huge companies. They're used to doing everything on a share. Investment to them means investment in web and SEO stuff, which is not cheap, but it's also not that expensive. So to turn around and say, here's an enterprise IT contract for a bunch of testing packages, it's way out of their league, right? They think I'm going to do business for a couple $100. And it's like, my business will never work if I'm doing that. So yeah, in those early days, you got to go through that loop lots and lots of times. What are your actual problems? What are your objections? Make sure I've kind of got mine is ready, or I'm ready to paint a picture. And with time, you also just learn to spot who's interested, who's not, who's even in your wheelhouse to begin with. And it becomes oddly satisfying when you can say, oh yeah, no, this isn't the fit, right? Politely, but you just know we're not, what you're doing and what I'm doing, there's not a match here. Maybe, best of luck, keep in touch, etc. It gets easier. But in those early days, you just don't know. You're in a dark room kind of fumbling for the light switch.
Yeah, love it. Very last thing, like when we talk about people that inspired you, people often mention, I don't know, like Zuckerberg or Bezos as business inspiration, but you mentioned a guy who inherited regional wrestling, turned it into global entertainment, Vince McMahon. Why is that?
I'll put the disclaimer on it that he's not a very nice guy and all sorts of terrible accusations against him. So I don't condone anything Vince McMahon does in his personal life, and doesn't sound like a very nice guy. But what I liked about his story was wrestling, it had this kind of gentleman's understanding where it was territorial in the US. And there was this group in the Northeast and this group in the Southwest, and they all kind of had their parameters and nobody stepped out of line. He came from a wrestling family. He inherited it from his dad, who I think was in the Carolinas. And he was the first one to say and think that I could make this bigger. I could do this better. I could gobble up this whole thing. He chased the TV contracts and he chased all the best talent from all the regional spots. Everybody in the industry hated him. And I don't know if I could even be that type of person. He must have been despised, getting death threats left, right, and center, because he took the whole model for an industry and just said, no, we're going to do it this way. And within a decade, by the time they were doing WrestleMania and pay-per-views and they had the TV contracts, the regional wrestling had turned from the actual pro circuit into the minor leagues because everybody wanted to go to the WWF where contracts were happening and where you get the exposure and where you could build your career, right? So it's crazy to me that nothing really about the macro changed, maybe cable TV, but it just took one guy to look at it all and have the ambition to piece it all together and just railroad on through, right? So I always found that to be a really interesting story. And to this day, I mean, it's merged with the UFC and it's still growing. Now they're going after international stuff. So it's a very, very strange business. I'm kind of fascinated by it. I can't watch it anymore. It's just too childish. Having grown up with Steve Austin and everything, there's always a certain attraction to what is going on with that company. Like, what a strange industry, right?
Yeah, love it. Kyle, thank you so much for your time today. Really love your openness and honesty and sharing all your experience with us.
It was great to do it. Thank you.
Thank you for joining me on the iGaming Leader podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, head over to igamingleader.com for more conversations and insights. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast. I'm your host, Leo Judkins, and I hope to see you next week.